next cast we're going to demonstrate with the rigid casting material will be the standard short leg cast. When applying the short leg cast with synthetics, it's very important because we will be using 3 different rolls to use the appropriate water technique with the rolls. The first 2 rolls we will not be dipping in water, and then the last roll we will dip in water. And a standard short leg cast, by the textbook, it extends from the base of the metatarsals distally up to the tibial tuberosity proximally, and the foot should be kept in neutral dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, eversion. So we'll proceed to apply the short leg cast. Again, the choice of stockinette becomes important in terms of our 2 criteria, fit and dimensions. And as with the other casts we've demonstrated, the time taken to roll up the stockinette makes for easier application. Now again, we have extra stockinette at the proximal end, and that will provide for comfort as we fold it back over the cast as we finish the cast. Once we bring the foot into what would be neutral 90 degrees of dorsiflexion, to get rid of the wrinkles in the stockinette, we simply make 1 snip in this stockinette and cut around to the opposite side of the heel, and then overlap the 2 to remove the wrinkles. Now it will be important that we try and retain our position of 90 degrees of dorsiflexion from this point forward, and that becomes a challenge, and there are many ways to address it, and you'll have to use the way that works best at your particular clinic. As we wrap, we want to wrap so that the forces of our wrap are going to help keep the foot in neutral eversion and dorsiflexion. As we apply the padding, remember that we're establishing dimensions, and being behind the toes on the top puts us below the metatarsal heads underneath on the plantar surface. So we want to make sure that we go completely out over the metatarsal heads with our padding wrap. Now as we go up a cone, again, we want to compress the padding material distally and stretch it proximally so that we maintain a flat contact on the leg all the way up to the tibial tuberosity. One area of concern for extra padding at the proximal end would be the fibular head, where the perineal nerve becomes superficial, so we can add an extra piece of padding there. Then we want to apply additional padding over the medial and lateral malleolus. And we want to also put some extra padding over the Achilles area. So we can accomplish that without circumferential wrapping, but by stirruping the material around. And then the last place that requires an additional bit of padding is over the heel. And now we have extra padding in all of the appropriate areas. After applying our gloves, we can open the first package, remembering that we are not going to use water with the first wrap. And as with the padding, we want to start and cover the metatarsal heads. And we want to cover the complete foot, ankle, and leg all the way up to tibial tuberosity. Now we can roll back our stockinette up top. The second roll we are going to apply for weight bearing so that the patient may wear a cast shoe after the application is completed. As we come around the metatarsal heads, we need to do what's called a fan fold to build up extra material as we come around the metatarsal heads. Then we continue around the heel, and we want to build up some extra material for heel strike, and we can accomplish that by a simple fan folding of the material. And then we want to taper the rest of the material up the leg to avoid the potential for a stress riser. We can always have gravity work for us by cutting the material off so it will lay down and have gravity work for us. Now we do our trimming around the toes, so we need to cut the material away on the great toe side and then at an angle towards the small toe. Now we can roll back our stockinette, and at this time we can cut away any excess if we have excess stockinette. So it's important that our cast extends out under the metatarsal heads, but yet behind the toes on the dorsum. So now we're ready for our final roll of material, in which we will dip into water. And we will give it 3 squeezes because we want it to go on to set immediately. In this roll, we will start proximally, catching our stockinette. Catching our bottom stockinette. And now we're ready to smooth and mold our cast. Because we have not dipped the first 2 rolls in water, we can make any final minor adjustments in terms of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion of the cast. Toes up. And at this time, we can wet our gloves to enhance the slipperiness and also increase the set time. Relax. So with my right hand, I'm maintaining 90 degrees of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, and molding the arch of the foot. With my left hand, I am molding the Achilles tendon and os calcis and around the malleolar area. We can also mold along the anterior tibia so that we can create a slight bit of triangulation in the cast, which will help monitor rotation. As you might be able to hear now, the cast is going on to set, and it's important that we continue our mold. The other important thing is we want to compress around the toe area so that we're not binding the toes, that as weight bearing happens, that the toes have room to spread. I always tend to hold and mold the cast just that little extra so that I don't sacrifice or lose any of the shape that we could have had and should have had ultimately. The patient lives with this for the next 3 to 4 to 6 weeks, so every little detail, 30 seconds in application has a 4-week effect on the patient. So now we've completed our molding, and you can see the cast is molded around the heel and Achilles area, the arch area. The toes have plenty of room. We've covered the metatarsal heads on the plantar surface. And the top will remain comfortable and flexible because we only have one layer of fiberglass under the stockinette, and then it becomes very rigid as you move down the cast. So now we have our completed short leg cast, and just to revisit what we set out to accomplish, tibial tuberosity as the most proximal point, and you'll notice that the material has remained flexible because we only have one layer of tape under the stockinette with 2 layers of stockinette for comfort. As we move down the cast, it becomes very rigid, and you can see the molding that we've accomplished around the heel and Achilles area. The arch is well molded, and on the bottom we've covered the metatarsal heads on the plantar surface. And yet on the dorsum, we've made sure there's plenty of relief so that in toe off of her gait in her cast shoe, this will not bind. And we've maintained 90 degrees of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, and neutral inversion, eversion. So now what we would add to this to make it a weight-bearing cast would be a cast shoe that would either be a sandal type or a closed toe type of shoe cast shoe that just straps right on to the cast. And so in 20 minutes, the patient is now ready to resume weight bearing. And it's critical that the patient always wear the rubber sole when they're ambulating on their cast. At night, when they go to bed, they can take their cast shoe off, but when they're walking on the cast, they should wear the cast shoe. The next thing we're going to demonstrate, if you should desire to put a walking heel on the cast, an application technique using the synthetic materials. The important things to remember when applying a heel, and there's a variety of designs, is that the bottom surface of the heel is neutral, the same as the bottom surface of the cast. So it will need to be neutral, eversion, inversion, and dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And the center of the walking heel should be in alignment with the anterior rim of the tibia. So ultimately, the placement of the walking heel should be in alignment with the anterior tibia, and it should be neutral in all perspectives. So as you can see, with the fit of this walking device, there's a gap that needs to be filled in. And so as we apply this, I will show you how to take care of that. Again, we will employ the no water for the initial step of this, which will give us some extra time. So what we're going to do to fill in this gap is we're going to take extra material and just use it as a spacer. And I need to check my alignment, and I need to check my positioning. After we've accomplished that, we just need to secure the walker. Then we can cut the unwetted material off and wet the roll. And an important thing to remember is when we finish the roll, we always want the material to end up on fresh material. Now we can wet our gloves. And now we can make sure of our final alignment. And it's very important as the material's setting now to squeeze in and press in around the walker so that we're removing any air gaps in the And also for assuring good lamination, when you're applying this to an already set cast, you don't have to worry about pulling too tight. So you can apply tension, and that will help facilitate good lamination. And you can see where we've pressed here how we've eliminated that, that gap so that we'll have solid stability right from the cast to the walker. So now to revisit anterior tibia, 90 degrees, and then neutral, inversion, eversion that we can see in this perspective and that perspective. So we can see anterior tibia and neutral 90 degrees, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And that's a way of applying a walker. As I said, the design of these differs, which might modify the technique slightly.